Welcome to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore living the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, and Dr. Pat on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Are your thoughts keeping you small? Are you ready to get big? I will offer you ideas to transform what you are thinking into conscious action. Explore what is keeping you small and how to shift your behaviors in order to get big. Learn what is possible for you. Get ready to get big and live life out loud starting now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Get Big Out Loud. I'm Dr. Pat, and I get to take this complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with the most incredible Kari Knutson. And one of the things I love is that we get to talk about things that are right up there in our face. They're like right there. They're up there. They're right, like, boom, right there. They're right there in our face. And the question mark really becomes, what do we do about it? You know, are there pieces of ourselves that we can get to know or know ourselves better? Are we out in the world just kind of floundering around? Like, do we know who we are? But, you know, more importantly, here's the thing. And Kari, you're going to jump in on this. If you don't know, like what you're working with, like all this here, right? All this, you're like all of it. If you don't know what you're working with, you don't know what your boundaries are. You don't know what you're doing that could be done better. You may have a sense of self, but maybe not. You may be doing a version of yourself that your mama, your papa, your aunt, your uncle, your ex told you, your current partner, all of the above. They're kind of like telling you who you should be. And you're never going to find those slippers. Never going to find those slippers. And, you know, so if you don't find those beautiful, sparkly red shoes as you travel down your own yellow brick road, and you don't know yourself well enough to determine whether you want to make friends with the Tin Man, have a conversation with the Lion Guy, or if you just want to light up the straw man just for fun. So today is looking at the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life, because one of the things that we know is that the hardest thing to look at is in the mirror. And what that means is everything about who we are, what we do, may have an impact. Today, Kari Knutson is the host of this fabulous show. She is out there in the world. She is doing things beyond what is unimaginable. And what she's doing is, when she launched Get Big Out Loud, she had a purpose in mind. Because if you are the owner of Knutson Speaks, if you're that person, if you're in the world and you're on the stage, and before COVID, she was on the stage and she is back on the stage. Not only is this, but a teacher, guidance counselor, storyteller, mother. She hasn't rapped yet on the show, but I got to wait to see when she's going to do that. You know, she is somebody that has been an expert in the world on emotional intelligence and human development. And so what the conversation is about today, and what the world is about today, that you're going to get to hear about, are things that challenge us to be who we truly want to be. But in understanding our personality, understanding who we are, our preferences, allows us to become who we want to become. Kari, what do you think?
Wow, Dr. Pat, you are on fire today. Thanks.
I am on fire because I had a very interesting morning. And, you know, there's no mistake that you pick a topic that's going to be like up in my face.
Huh.
But part of that is, in the world we live in, we have to learn all about ourselves, don't we?
Yes, and that's exactly, I think I picked topics that I need to hear, that you need to hear, because we're people, right? Going through things, and despite successes or drive, there's always that reckoning of, like, that's why it's the complex, beautiful, and funny ride of life, because we are complex people living in complex world, and talking about these things is so important to help us be successful. The goal of the show is to give ideas that will help people actively think consciously about how they can utilize their strengths, think about their skill set, and think about ideas in psychology that can help them, you know, utilize these concepts to help them be better, to live better lives, to suffer less. That's my goal. And so today's idea, when we talk about knowing yourself, what I want to talk about is our self-concept, how we really get to know ourselves. And you brought up some good points. When so-and-so thinks of you as this way and society thinks this, how do we really get to know who we are? And then why is that important? So that's the setup for today's show, is knowing yourself, which may seem on the surface, I know myself, but when you really think about all the things that go with how we perceive ourselves, both internally and external influences, it can be really hard to know yourself. So today we're going to take a deep dive into how we can get to know ourselves, why it's important, and the concept of self-concept, to repeat myself, I guess, the concept of self-concept.
Yeah. Let's start from the beginning, because I don't know about you. Tell me a little bit about your journey with this and why this is so important. And the reason I'm asking the question is this. I have taken personality, what do you call them?
Like a personality, like a Myers-Briggs or a
traits, preferences. We've done it. And now with emotions, you can take and you can do the, what do you call it? Emotional intelligence things. You can do very thing. But the thing that you're bringing up here is knowing who you are, what you believe, and why you act the way you do is an important part of self-concept. I want to tell you, this morning, I was on a call. It lasted 2 hours. And the purpose of the call was to review items that were due, deliverables, because, it's important for us as a company to do that. But what I realized is you have to know yourself well enough to know how you're going to conduct yourself in business, even if it's emotional. And we don't talk about that enough. That's why emotional intelligence in the business world has been so hard for businesses to move forward, because one, they don't want to acknowledge that emotions exist in business. Come on. You got a big sales deal and all of a sudden the sales deal falls through. That's a thing. But do you know who you are? Do we know who we are?
Well, and do we know who we are? And like you said, bringing up emotions, I feel like we run by emotions. So sometimes we are over, we tell ourselves, don't be mad, but we're mad, or don't take that personally, but we take it personally, or you shouldn't be upset, but you're upset. So sometimes we're in constant kind of what I call negotiation with our emotions. Should I feel this way? Shouldn't I? Is this okay? I don't want to, but I feel our feelings really run so much of the show. And it's important to remember we are not our feelings. We are experiencing those feelings, and we can have so many feelings at any given time. But what you're saying too, in terms of knowing yourself, if you know yourself in the context of whatever situation you're in, it's easier to show up to those situations with confidence that you can make good decisions, and also without being swayed. Sometimes it's easy to be swayed, like, should I think that? Should I do that? And we need to take other people's opinions into consideration. But I think that many times people extend themselves with what other people think and don't value enough of what they think. And getting to the core of what we know about ourselves, what's true for us, helps connect us with our intuition, which helps to guide us, especially in complex situations where we can, here's a really good example. Let's say the business deal falls through, like you just were saying. And you I worked so hard on this, I tried. And then you could take it a number of ways depending on your self-concept. Of course it didn't go through. Nothing ever works for me. Why don't people think that I can handle this? I'm always second guessed by everyone. Look how everyone else didn't do their part. That's just part of my life. No one ever works with me the way I want. We tell ourselves these stories and then we personalize it. And sometimes the self-concept really plays out of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not smart enough, or this has everything to do with me and nothing to do with the actual situation. We personalize it. And so when you know yourself, you can take a step back and ask yourself, is this true? Is this relevant? Is this helpful? And look at what you do without judgment. So the deal falls through and it's all awful and there's a lot of emotions. But sometimes you have to say, what am I going to do in this moment? And then that self-concept might come into play. I'm a resourceful person. I'm a person who can figure this out. I'm a person that utilizes my team to help me. I can figure out another way. Yes, this is hard and I feel defeated in this moment, but I'm not defeated as a person. And do you see how many ways you can take that from that one situation, just from your own self-concept driving your thoughts? And then those thoughts and emotions get mixed up together, and then those turn into your behaviors. So do you see how many different ways that could go?
Yeah. And this is what we're talking about today. But do I know every part of myself? Well, I think as time goes on, I get to know myself better. I get to discover more things for myself. But then what is the question really? Why is it that it's an ongoing journey? Why is it? Why is it, Kari? Why is it the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life, especially this topic? And the reason I bring that up is because of self-concept. You know, I would imagine that when we're born, we pop out, like I popped out.
I
And
bet you
there
popped
I did pop. I really did. That's what they told me. When my that's a whole nother show. We could talk about how my uncle described it. Although my mother through my mother's eyes. But when we're born, you know, we're born with these little teeny babies. And I wonder what would happen in our evolution if nobody interfered with
Mhm.
telling us what we could do, how we could do it or not do it. Now, I do have a couple of friends back in the day, that's how they raised their children. But this idea of self-concept, it is something that we're always developing, Kari. Is that it? Give us your view of how this evolves for us. And
Yeah.
how did it evolve for you?
Yes, great questions, because it is self-concept. This idea does evolve as we grow and as we have experiences, as we reality test other people and experiences. Our self-concept grows, like little things like from when we're young, even. Can I get help when I need it? Will people respond to me if I ask for help? Will they need it? And some of us, like for an example, if you felt at a young age that you people wouldn't help you, or you couldn't get your needs met, you might have developed the concept of, I need to be independent. I need to be fiercely independent because no one else can help me. And then you may carry that with you through life from experiences. And maybe legitimately, if you look at a situation on its face, your mother and father were both working, you were a latchkey kid. At some point, they divorced and you had to go between houses. You couldn't always ask them for things because they weren't available or busy or tired, but it wasn't their intention to make you feel radically independent, right? But then you develop that self-concept of, I have to take care of myself, no one's going to do it for me. And so we get messages like that also when you think about when we go to school, or when we're in environments where we're being judged potentially, like, are you a good student or bad? And some people play school well, like people who show up, who can do the work, can sit at the desk, can write the papers, can raise their hand, get marked as you are a good student. And so that self-concept comes from our education system. Am I a good student or not? And then also sometimes the concept, am I smart or not, comes from that. And when we smart is such a limited, am I book smart? Am I nature smart? Am I music smart? What does smart mean, right? But as we go through life, we're getting constant feedback about ourselves, and then we're internalizing that into our self-concept, like I'm resourceful or I'm not. And it's usually kind of one or the other. It's hard to kind of be in the middle. We kind of tend to go one way or the other with those kinds of things. And those, when that gets locked in as we get older, it still evolves, but we have to be more conscious to change it. And sometimes when people realize, like, I think I might actually be good at school if I had studied something I was interested in, or my family pushed me to be a doctor, but I really wanted to, be a horticulturist, and I would have been so much better if my interests had matched. Or I some people who never got to affirm their experience, like the self-concept is, it's not safe to express my feelings. Maybe you grew up in a way where it's not safe, or you just don't do that in your family, right? So you say, like, then you internalize, it's not safe for me to express myself. Then you start to think things like, my feelings aren't important. And then the self-concept is I don't deserve to express myself. So do you see how over time in school, with society and academics and our family systems, those things build over time and add up to our self-concept? And to your point, what if no one interfered? It'd be interesting because we get interfered with from the minute we're born, in terms of
Yes.
constant feedback about if we're right or wrong or good or bad, or if our behavior is okay or not okay. And that's how we grow up. But the self-concept is evolving all the time. And just to put a punctuation on this idea is, you are not done. There is still time to change your self-concept. And I find a lot of this in people who don't think, for some reason, they're not worthy of love, of fulfillment, of happiness or of lack of suffering. You were not born to suffer. And so sometimes when I work with people, we have to talk about like there is still time to change your self-concept despite what other people have said or your experiences, or maybe because of that we fight against it, but whatever it is, I still want to give people hope. It's a journey through our whole lives. It's not there's not a start and a stop. Your self-concept can evolve your entire life.
Yeah. And to your point, that's really my discovery about this morning. But this morning was really a culmination of a number of different events that helped me understand myself better. And one of the hardest things I think, and I don't like to generalize, but the women that I work with and the women that I talk to, there's one thing that really gets us really hung up. And it's the idea of standing up for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a generalization, but you can go through your list. Now, how much of that is personality? How much is that inherent? How much is that really captures every aspect of who you are, who you think you could become, and who you think you're not? I mean, now, do men and women have? Yes, both men and women, but I don't work with men, generally speaking. And I know for the women that I work, and it doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter how high they are in the company. It doesn't matter if you're Melissa Etheridge, Olivia Newton-John. None of that matters. But this is one thing that, is it inherent, or have we been socialized? Have we been socialized to be nice? Have we been socialized not to ask for a raise? Have we been socialized when somebody says to us, you did not do this, and I paid you a lot of money for it? Are we socialized to say, well, guess what? I did do it and you didn't pay me enough. And you see, those are things that my buddies, my male counterparts would say. Now, the flip side of that is, how well do we all know ourselves? How do men, women, children alike? Why is it important, though? This is the key. Because there is an end game. And Kari, you're bringing the end game.
Right. But I want to
Right?
circle to what you're talking about, which is
Yeah.
based on our genders, we can be socialized in so many different ways for like you said, am I supposed to be a people pleaser? Or am I supposed to be tough? And if I, like, as a woman, if you say the same verbiage as a man might say, you might come off as like, oh, she's so controlling. And a man like, oh, he's so strong and thoughtful. And for men and women both, it's a disservice to both. But we are heavily influenced by our gender and our upbringing to, what does it mean to be nice? What does it mean to get along? Okay, versus what does it mean to be bold or say your thoughts without it going to another way? Like, oh, that person is so stuck up, or they think they know everything. Like, when can you assert that you're smart or intelligent in certain circles, and when should you stand back and let other people? I mean, it's a game, and it's a lot of, I think, too, with this kind of where we're at with defining gender roles and the explosion of like, what does it mean to be a woman or a man? And the idea of like, do men get the same rights to their feelings as women? It's been like women's domain for so long, and like men who are heavily repressed in the field of when they do express their emotions, they're seen as weak. And so then why would they express themselves if they can't express themselves and get support for it? And so this idea, also women who want to assert themselves, and they're thinking like, who does she think she is? And like creating space for women to show up that way. Also, I think when we talk about raising our kids, there's a lot of talking about like, oh, you're so smart, oh, you're so pretty, like deciding how we talk to kids about like what they do. How did you feel about your work? Are you proud of it? It seems like you worked really hard on this. How does it make you feel? Like trying to switch how we affirm kids.
Yeah. I mean, these are game changers, aren't they? They're real game changers. Let's just stay with your thought about kids and children, because I don't know about you, but I know for me growing up, certainly did not have plug in, plug on, tweet, beep, phones like beeping all it like, right? Like you got your phone, it's like, right, trying to have dinner, but like you got your. So there's where we live in today, and I want to talk about, this idea, taking it to that next step for you, and that idea of social media and reality Now,
Mm.
I've talked about social media a lot, and one of the things I love about social media and I love about technology is it has absolutely raised the bar for helping us in very big ways. For example, we all learned about the importance of a cell phone during 9/11, and other times, right? We learned that technology, that cell phone technology, albeit back then probably wasn't what it is today, but we learned the power of that. Now, fast forward to where we are now, we have so much access to so much information. I mean, I Googled a recipe to cook my chicken thighs this weekend, right?
Right.
But there are consequences on sides and there are opportunities. What's your take on social media versus reality?
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because the idea of how we use social media, and it's just really been, I'd say, maybe in the last 20 or so years, in terms of like how it's grown and influenced from like what's your, what's your social media presence, and do you have a presence and identity on social media, and have you branded yourself? No one would even have said that however many years ago, but now it's like, what's your brand? What's your personal brand? Because we're putting ourselves out constantly for essentially feedback and review and marketing and all of that stuff, and it's become part of our, like, do you have a Facebook account, do you have an Instagram, like, what, personally and professionally, people use this for a lot of reasons, and it's not always bad. And that's the idea of, like you're saying, it's like a double-edged sword. We can't totally demonize technology and then use it and love it, right? But the idea with technology is, sometimes what I find has happened is we're not being realistic about what we put out there. It's not a fair critique, because some parts of life are boring. Some things are not worth tweeting about. Some parts of your day are not, some dinners don't turn out. Sometimes you just are not having anything to report on, but you could be like, oh, I need to, like, I post every day, so I better think of something, to do. I better stay relevant. So then we create these false narratives and false realities for other people to expose them to other people consume them. And then what happens is two things. One is that we're projecting on something that's not real, but then we know we're living a lie, and then people are comparing that and judging it, and then creating a version of us for themselves. So there's this kind of trifecta of weirdness going on, where nobody's going to post, I had a boring dinner, I did a bunch of emails today, right? I have laundry piled up, right? If you look around the house, you're like, none of that's post worthy. So we're creating images of ourselves for other people to consume that don't match real life. And that's what I think we need to, dive more deeply into, is this idea of our self-concept to an external audience and our self-concept to ourselves. And those two things then placated by when people like or hit, smiley face, or leave a comment. And let's say you post something and you don't get comments, and then, do you not like me? Did I not do it? Is it not good? Am I not relevant? How many followers do I have? And then the whole game of your self-concept might play into a single post connected to your worthiness or your business acumen, or if it's something's going to work or not. And we can get really trapped in the cycle. And that's what I think is so important. And I want to discuss more, to take a deeper dive into that, because I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trap.
And it's really important because what happens in that arena? How does self-concept really get activated? And what is it about self-concept that we think is static, but it may not be? I mean, here I am, and I'm doing back-to-back shows. And when you see me in public, or you meet me, or let's say we're at a networking event, I'm the quietest person at the table. So what is it about our self-concept personas and our ability to understand ourselves better helps us navigate the waters of who we want to become and what we want in life? See, this is it. I love the word desire. It's been talked about so much, but we all have them. How does our self-concept get us there, and how does it not? And is there anything we could do about it? We're going to talk about this and more when we come back. Before we go, Kari, what is the best way for people to find out about you?
Yeah, they can go to knutsonspeaks.com. That's KNUTSON speaks.com. Up there, I have lists of my courses that I teach, and I have information on coaching. And I just finished my one-woman show, but there's still information up there about, well, do it again. And that's the best way to reach out to me, at knutsonspeaks.com. to find out like what I'm doing, or if I could be helpful to your organization or your group through presentation or coaching.
I love it. We're going to take a short break, everybody. And when we come back, how do you think about yourself? What's the first thing that comes to mind? And then self-concept is so interesting because those of us that are in the world of understanding and research, we always like to compare our self-concept to what other people see as who we are. Let's take a short break. That and much more. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. Kari Knutson's show. This is Get Big Out Loud. Before we talk about this, self-concept is so important. I know it's important in my coaching practice, Kari, and I'm pretty sure it's important in your coaching practice. It's important in my coaching practice to understand who I am on any given day, but also to help people get there for themselves, I mean, that's kind of a core competency of coaching, right? Is this idea of self-discovery, self-concept, but also what do you do with it? Where do you go? But I want to, again, mention to people how they can work with you as a coach. Congratulations for getting out there again. Tell everybody how they can do that.
It's exciting. And like you said, technology has made it so easy because now I'm coaching like all over the country with different people because we can do it through Zoom, which is amazing. So you can reach out to me at knutsonspeaks.com and KNUTSON speaks.com to find out about me and connect with me for anything I can do for you.
Yeah. Part of this is we talk about things that are important in everyday life, but are also important in where we see people coming in, stepping into a couple of potholes, getting the challenges. And the idea of self-concept, the way that you're talking about it today, so the idea of this topic and the way you're talking about it today is so important because the common question marks that happen along the way is, okay, this is the idea I have about myself, right? That makes me this is my idea today. This is my view of myself. Now what do I do with it? So let's talk about, first of all, nature versus nurture.
Sure. Well, and when you think again, you can look at your own life and think about how you've potentially been in your environment and overcome things or believe things about yourself because of certain people in your environment. Like you might have had a tough upbringing, but then one teacher believed in you and you were like, my self-concept is I'm someone who can make it, right? Or you might have had a different kind of upbringing where you thought you could do everything and someone's like, oh, slow down there. You're not as awesome as you thought you were. And you might be like, am I? Like when you think about nature and nurture, a lot of stuff comes from our family of origin when we start. And there's so many, I'd say different kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to think about the different kinds of affect, like family, friends, our community, the schools that we go to, like all of those things make an impact on our self-concept. And it's hard to get to the root of it because we don't know, because we're influenced from such a young age. What would we think about ourselves left to our own devices? But that is the beauty of adulthood, is that you can see with some perspective. I like to call it look back to see forward. When you look back, you can say, oh, where did I get this idea about myself? Oh, then how did this get affirmed or denied? And then how did this play out? And so sometimes what the greatest thing is as an adult, you can see how you got your self-concept. You can look back and think, oh, this happened and this. And if you do it without judgment, but with curiosity, you can get a lot more out of the conversation. And so like a lot of times in coaching, we'll do this look back to get ahead. Like what made you who you are? Why do you believe these things about yourself? What do we need to shift about those thoughts in order for you to actually make changes? Because it's easy to want to make a change, but our self-concept can really hold us back. And just a quick example, I was working with someone who was in their 50s, who hadn't finished college and who wanted to go back, but she's like, I've never been a good student. I'm not a really great candidate. I don't even know, if they would take me. I mean, who am I to try to go back to school now? But something in her was like the intuition voice, that small, silent part of you, that not silent, but quieter voice. Sorry, the quieter voice is saying, go back to school, go back to school, go back. But she needed to see herself as someone who could go back to school, who could be successful, who could try again. Her self-concept was what's going to get her there, not necessarily even her motivation. But like, am I a person who tries things that are scary? Could I be a good student? Could school work for me? Could I be a college graduate? And that's all her in her mind, right? Because something in her, like, I want to be that person, but her self-concept is really limiting her ability, because when she looked back and saw all the reasons where she thought she couldn't, and also the reasons why she quit, it made it really hard to make that next step, even though she's fully capable and know she wanted it, but self-concept got in the way of like, do I see myself as a person who pursues my degree at 50? So those things play into all of us. Any one of us who's listening to this right now could think about something in your life where if you look back and you're like, wow, how has my self-concept led to this? And where do I actively need to make a shift in my thinking so I can step into this new part of myself and my new life?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up. Look, real story, and I want to talk about it really quickly. I knew for some strange, bizarre reason, I wanted to go get a doctorate. I didn't even know it was a doctorate. But I knew I did, because I delivered mail to all the genius people at Bell Labs, and they had a PhD at the end of their name. And I walked down the hall one day with Linda in Bell Labs, and this like crazy science, crazy people, engineering, really fun people, frogs, and taught me ping pong. I love these people. I delivered mail. You can never find their mailbox. And I'm walking down the hall with Linda, and we're both like entry-level people at Bell Labs. And I said, Linda, I am going to get a PhD someday. And Linda had a moment. And this is what you're talking about. This is the influence of others. And Linda said, of course you will. Absolutely.
Oh.
And then I followed up with what exactly is a PhD, but that's a longer story. But
that's that moment. Do you see that?
It's that moment. It's a moment
where Linda could have said, and Linda, everyone who's listening, is your BFF of the whole world, right?
And our producer. Yeah.
And a producer, and gives me constant trouble for everything all the time. She's like, what are we talking about today? She's so East Coast. She's like, I don't do feelings over here. She always gives me a hard time. But for people that listen, so Linda, this is such a good example, because Linda could have said in that moment, right, Pat. Like, who do you think you are? Right? Like, sure, nice pipe dream, right? Or she could have said, well, I don't know. I mean, it costs a lot of money, and you don't know where you're going to go, and you're going to, and like that whole thing. And like, are you the kind of person who can, I don't even know how you'd finance that. And then do you see in that moment, that could have led you down so many different roads. And that is the influence of others, for better and for worse. And hopefully you're surrounding yourself with people who would say something like, of course you are. Let's make that happen. I believe in you, because that allows something in you to be like, oh, that's a little notch towards where I want to go. And I don't have to fight against the woulda, shoulda, couldas, and all the things that are wrong. So in that moment, that's a beautiful example. That is a moment when another person affirmed your self-concept instead of denied it. And because she affirmed it, then you'd be like, now what's a PhD? What should I get it in? How will I finance it? But in that moment, when people can affirm the best parts of our self-concept, that is beautiful. And that is such a precious moment in a relationship. And it's also good for when you're thinking about that, where can I look for moments like that when I interact with people? Where can I look for moments where I can be the yes person, or the support, or the confirming their self-concept? And this is making me think, when I work with people who are anxious about public speaking, a lot of times, because I'm not a good public speaker, and then that their whole narrative is I'm not a good public speaker, but yet when they talk to me and we have our coaching session, they're a wonderful speaker. So like, does it just change when you magically get in front of other people? Like, are you still, what's your self-concept, right? So this is the idea, like and I think, oh, this is my moment where I'm gonna like either shift something or give someone else another mirror to look up. Like, maybe you're not a bad public speaker. Maybe you just haven't felt confident or successful, or you don't have tools, but maybe you are actually a great public speaker, because you're speaking to me right now, and that's public speaking, right? So again, those moments where we can choose to aid someone's journey in a positive way are things we should all look out for. They all help.
I love this, because we talk to people every day who all of a sudden they're looking at an opportunity to do their own show. whether it's podcasts, and 9 times out of 10, they don't have a clue, they don't have an idea. And one of the things that's important for us to say to people is, look, we'll help you get from where you are to where you want to go if this is a place you want to go. I have someone right now that wants to learn to speak. I'm probably going to talk to you about helping her, get her some coaching. But along the way, we have to have such a clear sense of things for everything. Well, maybe not. Is it okay that I may not know what I want to do? I don't know my self-concept enough to not know what I'm going to eat for dinner tonight. Well, that's not what we're talking about at this level. We're talking about seriously important things.
Mhm.
And where we're talking about seriously important things, what we're really talking about is, okay, what is going to put me in the best possible view, self-concept of myself,
Mhm.
so that this decision is going to get me moving towards where I want to go and not further away. Do you see what I'm saying with
Yes,
that?
and this is the great setup, because what we need to do, especially as adults, because we have the opportunity, we have more choices, we have more decisions we can make. Like I can, like when you're a kid, you go to the school your parents drop you off, you wear the clothes they do, you do the activities that they say. And sometimes as an adult, we have to say, do I like dressing this way? Do I like these activities? Do I really know myself? And then we have choices to be like yes or no without having to negate everything. But then from those choices, like small things, right? Like maybe what activities you like to do, but like, how do I know myself so that as I'm going through life, most of the feedback we get as adults is usually what we can't do versus what we can. So self-concept is so important for us to develop with the reality testing, that we need. But the idea of like, can I do a podcast? And how would I make that work? Can I go back to school and how do I make that work? Can I speak in public and how would I do that? And for everybody else, for everyone else, it's a different, we all have our own stories, the things that we need our self-concept to help us through. Like, am I a person who can manage conflict? Am I a person that can try new things? Am I a person that can handle negative feedback and manage that? Am I a person that knows myself enough? And this is what I say with feedback a lot, is to like, who's giving it? What's the point and how would I use it? But if you don't have a good self-concept, one negative comment can crumble you. And then it could just derail everything. And this isn't about being false positive either. Like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And then I'm just going to go through life with my life with fake, false, and toxic positivity. That's not what self-concept is. Self-concept is knowing yourself enough to know, like, why does this situation make me uncomfortable? Why do I feel anxious when it's my turn to say something? And do I need to tap into my worthiness? What's keeping me from taking the next steps towards my goals? Is it some kind of idea about, did someone once say, who do you think you are to go and do that? Do I need to analyze, like, who do I think I am? I think I'm somebody, right? It's about the deeper thought process, not toxic positivity or false, like, I'm great at everything I do. Self-concept is how am I identifying myself? How am I thinking about my skill sets, my traits, my personality, how I show up in the world? And how am I using that feedback loop to shift and make changes and also keep me moving forward and not staying stuck in thoughts, patterns, and ideas that don't serve me? And that's why self-concept is more complex than like, just feel good about yourself, or like, don't worry what other people say. We always worry about what other people say. We're constantly taking feedback. Yes, no, right, wrong, good or bad. And it's the filter of that that's important, because I want people's feedback. I want to know how I'm doing. Like, if no one claps after a speech, I got some work to do. If I'm sitting there,
I've had that happen.
right, but you have to be real about that, right? Or if I'm hurting my family members by my comments, or trust, like, I have to think about that. We have to be like respectful of our interactions, because self-concept isn't just involving it lives here, but it's always tested outwardly, always. And we're getting constant information about it. So that's
It
why
is.
it's complex.
I love what you just said. Look, Kari, you work with people, and you're out there now, 24/7 coaching practice, all sorts of aspects of that, whether it's personal, group, team, organizational. You're out there. You also are somebody that has worked in the work world, like I have, right? You know, I
Mhm.
haven't always been an entrepreneur. I have a corporate career starting from the lowest level you can imagine, right? But what I've learned is this, and I'd like you to comment on it. Even today, in the call I had this morning, I learned something about myself. I learned something about what is important to me and what's not. I learned about myself what is going to help me make decisions, regardless of clients, sales. What is the most important thing to me about what we're doing here? Outside of making sure that I try to stay 80% aligned with what you see of the network, 80-20 rule, right?
Mhm.
What you talked about is so important. Now, I grew up slower than others. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. I graduated high school, I couldn't put a sentence together on paper. I graduated high school because I had an opportunity and I did something totally out of box and I got a passing grade in summer school. But I had both in my upbringing. I didn't have people literally that were close to me tell me I'm slow or different. I didn't have that.
Mhm.
Clearly, I had the kids that pretty much called me stupid and other things like that. But the adult figures I didn't. Amy Sarah in my junior high school pulled me in a room and said to me, I know you're different and you're amazing. Amy Sarah. I never forgot her. Amy Sarah. Dr. DeVito, my viola instructor, my stepmom, my mom, my aunts, my uncles. My uncles told me I was the best boxer they'd ever seen. Mind you, I was age 5. I don't know that if I didn't get that kind of reinforcement, that I'd be able to be here today. Linda's dad, Linda's mom,
Mhm.
crazy what her dad taught me.
Mhm.
Without him, I understood how to stand up for yourself. He taught me that. So talk about this. Self-concept is not static, is it? It's
No,
something we have to look at, adjust, and then decide.
and it also, to your point so beautifully, we have to think, who am I surrounding myself with? Either in a virtual space, like the what accounts I'm following, and in a very much in a real space, like who's in my life? Am I getting my self-concept from places that I can respect and trust, especially when feedback is difficult, because we don't always do things right. And sometimes there's hard lessons to learn around like how we show up. If you offended someone, or if you're being too brash, or if you're hurting someone's feelings, or if you are overstepping in some way, like it's not all about you're great no matter what you do. It's about that reality testing back and forth. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who do you feel safe with? And how does that ability to transform us? And when you were saying like the people that involve, with your life. And when I think about my entrepreneurial journey and the label I put on myself in terms of I was like, I'm a therapist. And then like, that's all. And then someone
Yeah.
said, oh, you're an entrepreneur. And I'm like, oh, my self-concept would not let me say I'm an entrepreneur. And then until I started hanging out with other people who also called themselves entrepreneurs and then started thinking about myself as a person running a business, it really took me some time to shift, but hanging out with those people helped me to have a different self-concept. Like I am running a business, right? Like, but I wasn't quite up to speed with that. And sometimes you need to hang out in environments where people help you with your self-concept, right? And help you see like, oh, look at how they do that. I want to try that, right? Or I can see myself in this space because someone helped invited me to be there and said, you can be there. Right. And so sometimes the journey, I think the point of this that I want to make is the journey involves other people. The journey of self-concept always involves other people, for better or for worse. And what you're saying is so important. If we look back in our lives, we could name so many people that were like this person, this situation, this was a moment that shaped my self-concept. And that would be such a great exercise because it'd be good for better and for worse.
Yeah.
This is a moment where for things that help us on our way, but then that's a great kind of exercise to think about, how did I get to here? How did I
Mhm.
get to here? And then when you can look back on those things and identify those moments, one good thing to do now in this moment is to say, okay, without any, hopefully social contract, can I start to ask myself what I like, what I believe, what I'm proud of? what I feel worthy of. Can I start in this moment to really reflect for myself, given my journey? And one thing I'll just add to what I'm proud of, I was working with someone who was a doctor, actually, but she had always wanted to be a dancer. And when we talked about what are you most proud of, she goes, I should say my medical degree, but she's like, I'm most proud of that I'm still found a way to dance. I'm still a dancer in my own mind. And I felt like crying in that moment because I was like, oh my gosh, how beautiful for her to be able to still say that about herself through a lot of struggle doing what she should have done because her family said you will be a doctor essentially. But she's like, I'm still identify as a dancer. And I thought that's a beautiful moment of your self-concept because some things we shouldn't let go. Those are important markers of who we are. They help us through life. They ground us. They give us focus. They give us identity. And those kind of things are vital as we move through life.
Yeah, I think they really are. I mean, I love when I look back and I reflect often, and I know you do too. And I know that what you think about, especially with this topic, is highly critical. I want to ask you this question. You know, I think if this topic would have come up 5 years ago or so, it may not have been as relevant as it is today. But we have so many touch points, influential markers on any given day. And
Mm.
those influential markers, whether it be social media, TV, it doesn't matter what it is, maybe a friend, maybe not, maybe somebody in a grocery store. But those markers then become such a ripple effect on us. You know,
Mhm.
once upon a time, we didn't live in that world. And that wasn't too long ago. We lived in the world where we were close to friends, family. Yes, with the internet, it made us closer, but clearly did not build up the communication forum we have today. What would your advice be to people that are listening to this show and have forgotten who they really are?
Oh, that is an important question to ask. Like, how do I find who am I? Who am I? Especially who am I now might be a better question than who am I? Because, like you said, we've been through so much in the last few years. Who am I now? Might be a good starting point to really, I'd say, to sit with yourself and think. If I just was being honest, and sometimes I say to people, if we do an exercise like in one of my workshops or in a coaching session, I'm like, don't share this, don't write it like you're going to share it with someone because then you might be tempted. I don't want to say to lie, but to stretch the truth, because if I'm sharing this with someone else, what will they think? I'm like, write this only for you. Write down your true answers to these questions. So sometimes we'll do leading questions like, when you think like, what makes you happy? What are you most proud of? What's a struggle you overcame and how did you do it? How do you see yourself as a person? And without the like, well, if my mom sees this, she'll think this, or my best friend, or if I'm sharing this, but really how you feel. And the idea of, if you lost your way, that's part of your journey. And maybe your self-concept is a person who's lost their way and a person who finds it again, a person who shows up with new meaning for it, a person who understands what kind of debacle the last few years have maybe been for you and decides to try again. I'm a person who tries again. I'm a
Yeah.
person who reinvents myself. I'm a person who, I've had people, coaching clients who've been like, I'm like the phoenix rising, right? And we'll think of analogies for that. I had another client who's like, I'm at the beach between the ocean that has its own thing and the safety of the beach. And I'm the person that's not afraid to like stand out and look at the ocean. Like, all these people, like, thinking about who you are now. The best part of self-concept is you can keep creating it. So if you
Yeah.
lost your way, fear not, my friends. The idea is like, you can still grab hold of something. And that thing never left you. Your self-concept, there's a piece of that in you that you can tie, your anchor to or whatever, and be like, I'm going to start from here. Who am I now? What do I want? What's possible for me? And do it with the sense of curiosity and hope, not judgment, not overwhelm, not it's too late, not who am I to even think these thoughts, because you're worthy and you're so important. And the work that you do in this world as it contributes to other people is so important. So don't lose yourself. You're tether yourself to a self-concept, and you can just simply start by saying, who am I now?
What a great way to end the show. Carrie, as usual, you're presenting us with information that is so it's so relevant and relative to the world we live in today. You know, um, I have to tell you, waking up with news where I just look at people and I look at people that are really facing enormous challenges, the latest headlines, whatever that is. And I know that even for the greatest challenges, we can all rise up. You know, we have a harder time rising up if we don't believe in who we are. And self-concept helps us get there. Kari, thank you. What's your personal message? And please give out your website.
Sure. My personal message is please, I love your point. What if I lost my way? You can find it again. And again, thinking about your journey, the idea of maybe reaching out to people who can help you, support you, figuring out where you are now. And like the idea of sometimes when I think about our best, most free times, I look at a picture of myself when I was 7 and I think that girl knows what to do. That girl knows what's that girl can speak her mind and has even to influence. And so sometimes when you think about like whatever's inside you, using that to help bridge the gap to what's going to bridge you forward. Find people that are in your community, find support, remember, ask, who am I now? And remember who you are, the best parts of yourself that got you this far and that will continue to help you on the journey. You can always hang out with me at KnutsonSpeaks.com. I'm happy to connect about any questions or ideas or things that will be helpful to you or your organization.
Yeah. And you know, you're looking at least for me, you're looking at somebody that struggled all of her life with self-concept. You know, the things that Kari Knutson teaches and she coaches on are more important than you can imagine. Because if I could pick myself up from a homeless situation in New York and still be able to look at my future and say positive centric in the world, you can do it too. That's why we do these shows. That's why Kari does what she does, because without it, as Linda would say, we tend to flounder in life. We don't want you to flounder. That's a fish. Thank you all for tuning us in. Kari, thank you.
Take care, Dr. Pat. Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back.
You have been listening to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, joining Dr. Pat live every second Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com. I will help you to know which thoughts are keeping you small in order for you to get big. Get big and live your life out loud. For more information, visit KnutsonSpeaks.com.